Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being with us today. On behalf of Hawaii Council of the Humanities, we are so happy that you could join us for this unique speaker series that is focused on looking at different Hawaii topics related to the theme debate and diplomacy, successes, failures, and consequences, which is this year's National History Day theme that we are an affiliate of. In this speaker series, we will dive deeper to illuminate Hawaii's histories, stories, and people by its people. Without further ado, I will now introduce our speakers and community leaders for today. They are joining us from the Japanese Cultural Center of Hawaii and Ulu Moving Archives. We have Mary Campany, who is a collections librarian. We have Betsy Young and Jane Kuruhara, who are amazing and longtime volunteers at JCCH. And last year we got the privilege of dancing with them, the Bon Dance at the Champaign University at our Honolulu District Fair, which was super awesome. We had all of the students dancing and it was a great time. Thank you, Betsy and Jane. And also we have Tisha Aragaki, who is the assistant archivist at the Ulu Moving Archive, but also she is a board member at the Hawaii Council for the Humanities. She's an amazing leader and speaker. So I can't thank you enough, Tisha, for joining us. So without further ado, I will now turn it over to Mary, Betsy, and Jane, who will be speaking on diplomatic leadership in Hawaii during World War II.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if anything looks funny. Oh. Okay, if everything looks good, then let's get started. My name is Mary, and with me today are my good friends, Jane Kuruhara and Betsy Young. We're here today to talk with you about debates and diplomatic leadership in Hawaii during World War II. We'd like to begin by telling you a little bit about the Japanese Cultural Center of Hawaii before we get into debate and diplomacy. The JCCH is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to preserve and share the history of the Japanese in Hawaii. We're especially interested in the World War II incarceration of Japanese Americans, but our collections cover the entire history of Japanese immigration to Hawaii, ranging from the first group of immigrants in 1868 to the post-war period. We share our history by making primary resources available online, researching internees, and preserving and providing access to historical documents, photographs, and artifacts. We also create films, books, and curriculum about the incarceration. So while the war started in 1939, it didn't reach Hawaii's shores until the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. That same day, the FBI used lists that they had created before the attack to go into the community and arrest influential Japanese community leaders. These people were Buddhist and Shinto priests, school teachers and principals, and journalists. They were a mix of Japanese and American citizens. These men and women were first incarcerated in Sand Island, which I don't have pictured here, and then sent to internment camps on the mainland and the Honolulu internment camp in Kunia, Hawaii. On the mainland, 110,000 Japanese Americans were sent to internment camps, but in Hawaii, only a couple thousand community leaders were incarcerated. Honolulu internment camp was Hawaii's only long-term internment camp, operating from 1943 to 1946. After it closed, the buildings were torn down and the site was forgotten. It was rediscovered by volunteers here at the JCCH in 2002. Today, it is a National Historic Site under the National Park Service. Today, Jane will share with us some stories from those who were incarcerated in Honolulu. Then Betsy will tell us about life outside of camp under martial law and about the Council for Interracial Unity. Please go ahead, Jane.
Aloha. Let me open with a question for you. Why did a camp used for prisoners in World War II and deep in a gulch, hidden and forgotten for about 60 years, eventually become a site to be preserved by the United States forever? And the picture on the left is of the camp as it was during the war. And then the picture on the right is when it was rediscovered in 2002. And what does this place have to do with debate and diplomacy? Let's go back in time to World War II and the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Let's also define debate as a coming together to discuss opposing views. There are many views we could debate about. For example, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, what does the governor of Hawaii think he should do? Or what does the military think they should do to defend Hawaii from invasion? And what about a small group of Japanese in the community who found themselves arrested? Today, I want to share two views with you. Let's start with a view from the small group of Japanese arrested. This is Jack Yoshitami Tasaka. He was first arrested, then given a hearing, and then finally interned. We know about his experience as an internee because he kept a journal in Japanese, which our bilingual volunteers translated. And here is his view of his interrogation. Numerous questions were asked. This one, relating to a possible invasion of Hawaii, is a sample. And I quote, "If your older brother lands in Hawaii, can you shoot your brother?" If I answered, I would not dare to shoot him. I would, of course, be branded as an enemy alien. However, if I answered, I would shoot him, they would say, "Don't lie. He's your blood brother. No way would you shoot him." What would you say? After such an agonizing hearing, Jack was interned at Honolulu. It raises a compelling question for us all. When there are threats to national security, should the civil rights of individuals be vulnerable or taken away? What do you think? Let's look at one more true story, this time not through the internee's eyes, but through the eyes and view of his little children. Because the initial arrests were mostly of fathers, families were ripped apart. Honolulu had visiting days monthly when a father could be visited by his family. Let me share here the lyrics written by internee Sam Nishimura about his visiting day. And I quote, "I waited for visiting day for a long time. Time passed slowly while we talked about pent-up hearsay. My children begged me to go out from camp with them. With tears in my eyes, I patted my children on their heads." Many years later, in the 1980s, the United States Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians reports a different view based on their research and investigation. They found that no Japanese was ever convicted of the crimes of espionage or sabotage during World War II. They concluded that the internment was the result of racial prejudice, war hysteria, and the failure of political leadership. Following their findings, the United States passed the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, and internees who were still living were given a letter of apology from the President of the United States and a $20,000 reparation check. I have just had time to share a couple of perspectives of the many views of this part of World War II. It is a complex story, a debate, and our country's eventual decision to preserve this part of history through this Honolulu site recognizes the view that we all need to remember this part of history so that we don't make the same mistake over and over again. Now, Betsy Young will share with you.
Aloha. Thank you for joining us. For this part of the sharing, I will highlight Debate and Diplomacy, Successes, Failures, and Consequences of Diplomatic Leadership in Key Events of World War II in Hawaii, in brief. To keep to my allotted time, it really will be brief, and I will share the from the graphic organizer that will be available to you, so you can access for your takeaway copy of the graphic organizer. Go to the link on the screen. Now, let's begin with the graphic organizer P1. Thank you. A question for the inquiry. Think on what were the consequences of the work of diplomatic leadership. To extend your understandings, please study the definition of terms at the top of the page and go on to the work of the diplomatic leadership for the key World War II events in Hawaii in brief. Determine success and or failure. First, the Council of International Unity. This multi-ethnic group of military and civic leaders was formed to preserve harmony in Hawaii's multiracial pre-war situation. From left to right, I would like you to meet the diplomatic civic leaders. Left to right is Shigeo Yoshida. He was a DOE school principal. Hawai'i Ching, YMCA administrator, and Charles Loomis, YMCA executor. Now Yoshida wrote for the group. The first objective was not only national defense, but, and this is significant, how we get along during the war will determine how we get along when the war is over. Next, let's move on. Good. P2, the next event, as a result of the pre-war planning and to put into effect the plans prepared by the Council of Interracial Unity, the Morale Division was established by the Territorial Office of Civilian Defense on October 18, 1941, and then the group moved and became part of the Office of Military Governor. Remember now, this is time of martial law. He was the governor. The Morale Division served in a key role as a bridge between the military government and the civilian community on matters related to public morale and to work towards keeping a unified and cooperative community. Under the morale section, various ethnic and national subcommittees were formed to work among the respective groups throughout the islands. The purpose of this emergency service committees was to channel the loyalty of the Japanese ancestry into a program of active participation in the war effort and to counter their insecurity and fear that they felt after the attack of Pearl Harbor. The committees were formed primarily of influential Nisei leaders, and the diplomatic leadership, of course, were the ex officio members. Now, next. Examples of the leadership and work of these committees. Significant. They played a central role in preventing the mass internment of Japanese Americans in Hawaii during the war. We did not get moved or shipped off to Molokai. They maximized Japanese American participation in the war effort, bought US war stamps and bonds. I remember doing that as a child. Every Monday we would bring our money to school and buy stamps and put it into our booklet and turn it into bonds. They donated blood and they served as block wardens, enforcing martial law curfew, and that's what my father did for our blocks. Lastly, on P4, other examples of the leadership, their leadership was critical in organizing the Varsity Victory Volunteers, a labor and construction corps. And this is a group that, because the military government kicked out the territorial guard, and my uncle was in the guard at that time, they disarmed them, they kicked them out, then they classified them as enemy aliens. But this group helped work for the entire year, and they were able to bring back. So at least they started off as non-combatants, and they brought back. Their work was critical in mobilizing the 442 Regimental Combat Team, Go for Broke volunteers. Now, to reflect on the diplomatic leadership of Shigeo Yoshida, Hung Wai-ching, and Charles Loomis for the work they did on the Council of Multi-Ethnic Unity, Morale Division, and the Emergency Service Committees, successful and/or failure, then please take a moment to reflect. What is something significant that you learned from their diplomatic leadership for you to make ours a better Hawaii in the spirit of aloha today? Next, Mary will share JCCH's pertinent resources that may help you with your History Day projects. Thank you for your interest and your attention. Please keep safe. Have a successful school year. Mahalo.
Thank you, Betsy. So Jane and Betsy have both shared with you some stories of debates and diplomacy within our community during World War II. We'd now like to share with you some resources that might help you or your students with their National History Day research. We currently have about 300 oral history interviews, more than 70 archival collections, and thousands of books and photographs within the JCCH collection. The best place for students who are conducting research for National History Day to start would be our online catalog, where all of these resources are kept. I'm going to briefly stop sharing my screen and scooch over to the internet so I can walk you through how that works. So don't worry about keeping any of these links. The links are all available in the bit.ly that had the graphic organizer, and we're going to put that back on the screen at the end of our presentation. So this is Sutron. It's our online catalog. If a student searches for Honolulu within the catalog, they'll find that our search results screen is divided up based on the type of item. So you'll find all of the books and printed, any work that's on paper in this printed works column, images under the images tab. We also have some videos, but you can only watch them if you visit us. And finally, we recently created a section of artifacts in our collection since students can't visit our gallery right now. A lot of the History Day students who come by are typically interested in oral history interviews and photos. So if you're interested in oral history in particular, you would uncheck this all content button, scroll down and check the oral history transcripts button, and then hit apply to see just oral histories that mention Honolulu, for example. We also have websites that include primary sources, lesson plans, videos, and more. In our website about the Hawaii internment, you can find primary resources and a general overview. You can also find a short classroom version of our film, The Untold Story. The Interne Directory is a relatively new online resource that is very helpful for students who are especially interested in certain internees. like if you have a family member who was interned. For example, if you wanted to learn more about Sam Nishimura, one of the internees that Jane mentioned during her section, you would just type in Nishimura. You'd click on our good friend Sam, and you'd find all of the information that we know about Sam. Finally, for teachers, we have lesson plans available on our JCCH website. We currently offer 2 lesson plans, the Internment Curriculum Guide, which is this one, and Can Hawaii's Aloha Spirit Survive a War, which is about the Nisei soldiers in the 100th, 442nd, and Military Intelligence Service. The Nisei Soldiers lesson includes a 22-minute film created by David Ono, an award-winning filmmaker, and tells the stories of 5 individual soldiers. Both lesson plans are intended for high school students. All of these resources are, or the links to all of these resources are available at the link below. If you're interested in viewing our physical collections, we're open by appointment only from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. You can email us at resource.center@jcch.com to make an appointment. I'm also very happy to scan and email you up to 20 pages of books or archival material from our collections. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. We really appreciate being invited to present for you, and we hope to hear from you about your History Day project soon.
Thank you so much, Mary, Betsy, and Jane, for that rich and beautiful presentation. Wow. We have amazing resources, and our students and teachers, I'm sure, are going to definitely use them. I know in the past they have, and they've had national projects, yeah. And so